All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Elaine Duff. I am your host. I am here for the 47th episode of celebrating the brand ambassador. And I'm really excited to have with me today Gary Crunkleton, the most hospitable man in all the South, I think probably in the world, and the owner and founder of the Crunkleton Bar, not one, but two, and quite a few other concepts. And I am here with Struan Grant Ralph. He is the global brand ambassador for Glenfiddich. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Elaine.
Yeah, and thank you. Oh, you're very welcome. And I forgot to tell you this before we went on. This is a very conversational show. So Struan, if you have a question for Gary, and I didn't ask, feel free, and Gary, the same thing, vice versa. So, you know, I'm just the moderator, but you guys are the stars of the show. So I wanted to start off just starting off with some of the background stories for the both of you, and then we'll jump into some more serious business. So Struan, first, I'm going to tell everybody, I can tell everybody, you've been working for Glenfiddich for over 10 years. I want you to tell us all your responsibilities for your current role, and feel free to expand on that, because I know the title brand ambassador can encompass many, many things, and I don't think many people understand how different the role can be and how expansive that role can be for one individual under the same title. And then a little bit about your career path, not from how they found you, because we're going to talk about that later, but more about when you first started the role to where you are now, and what that looked like. So, Struan, all you.
It's a big question, right? First and foremost, just a pleasure to join you guys, and just great to see Gary again. Lots of great memories of sharing whiskies with you down in the South. The role that I do now, you kind of caught me at a fairly opportune moment, because I am in London and we were filming today. So I guess so much of what ambassadors do now is about content creation and managing brands away from consumers. So for most of our careers, all of us, right, we're very consumer focused and facing, and we had a lot of great times addressing big audiences, small audiences, one-on-one, and trade shows and whatnot. I guess with like some of the changes that have happened in the world, and also it feels like the more senior you get in your role, the less time you actually get to spend one-on-one with your consumer, and you spend way more time on the back end, which I'm really interested to hear Gary's thoughts on that, running a couple of different venues, and maybe less time spent on the bar for you, certainly less time spent tasting whiskey with people for me. I now work on a global brand team, which encompasses a team of people based here in London, based up at the distillery in Scotland, and then all of our teams around the world, 24 brand ambassadors in various different markets, and then all the marketing teams and brand teams that accompany them. Glenfiddich is, I suppose, locally up in Scotland where I live, small and local, and it's made by real people, but globally it's a big brand, right? So we have all the things that accompany that. So brand building and strategy, content creation, messaging, all the comms, like e-commerce, all the things that are going to make up a big brand and its success. I kind of have a touch point in all of them. And I also get to work on really interesting things like liquid development. I have a really interesting role as a go-between spirits development and whiskey stocks and the markets, and a PR function as well. So if we're launching anything new, then I would, tell the story of that liquid or create the story of that liquid, which is obviously like a really interesting part of our jobs.
Yes.
And now and again, I just sit down and drink whiskey with people. And
I noticed also you said, and I know we have a second part of this question, but you also said it's mostly consumer, so you don't do as much trade anymore. Did you ever focus on trade?
So I'm perhaps kind of misspoke there. It used to be a huge trade focus. I would say that personally, it's less now. Yeah.
Gotcha. It's more of a, and I totally get that. As you get more senior, you do start to, people ask me, oh, you must be out in bars all the time. I said, I rarely go out anymore. I am mostly home, sitting in front of this computer, working at this desk right here. So yeah, you don't get to go out as much as you used to, but enough. I still go out and feel enough to be aware of what's going on and to engage with enough people, but not as much as I used to.
Struan, I have a question for you. When you're doing product development, you have to create a liquid, a spirit that appeals to the masses. Do you ever find conflict when you think, oh, I really, really, really love this whiskey, but I doubt it'll sell? I need to tone it down a bit. I know when I'm batching cocktails for big events, the drink that I batched might not be one of my favorite drinks, but I know it's a people pleaser.
I love that last.
Great question.
That last phrase that you said there, the crowd pleaser, the people pleaser. It's like every great cocktail menu in the world has like the drinks the bartenders love, which are probably quite bitters heavy, probably quite either smoky or dry or like, and then there's the ones that sell, right? Then there's the ones that like are shifting loads of volume. And yeah, whiskey to an extent has a similar ethos. I would say it depends on starting point, right? Because if you're creating a whiskey, but you know there's a demand from the market for it, Elaine and I have talked about a whiskey that we launched in the US, which was a 14-year-old bourbon barrel reserve. We knew when we were in the process of creating that whiskey what the audience was and how they would drink that whiskey. It would work in old fashions. It would work with barbecue food, right? So you already kind of know what that whiskey is going to taste like. I tried a whiskey this morning, which is in the pipeline for us, which is probably coming more from a point of view of we had something interesting at the distillery, and that's going to go with a different kind of energy behind it, as in we believe this is interesting. Listen, people can buy into it or not, but it's something new.
That's fascinating. I would love to be able to do that.
I think that is I think that's one of the coolest jobs you could probably do working for a brand, is to be able to get into the liquid development. So we're all envious of you, Struan. I love the fact, and I guess that's where those like special releases come out. You know, they're very short. You know, because there might be interesting. I mean, I know there's many reasons why special releases come out, but I'm assuming that every once in a while one gets through that you guys all found interesting. It might not be a people pleaser, but you know it's good, and the people who really are into whiskey are going to love it. But it's not going to sell, the million cases. It's more, it's going to do 10,000 cases or 5,000 cases, whatever that means. I'm just shooting out numbers. I have no idea.
Those are big numbers.
Yeah, those are pretty big numbers. You're like, yeah, that's a really.
We can tell you worked for Diageo, Elaine.
Yeah, exactly. 2 million. I only worked on 2 million case brands. But hey, I worked on all the brands like Don Julio, Bullet, and Ciroc. When I remember Ciroc was a 5,000 case brand, and that was a big day. The first year out of the gate. All right, so I guess we'll get into your career when we talk about you building your brand, your personal brand. So I want to get into Gary. You went from being a bartender to a very successful bar owner of 2 successful bars down in North Carolina. What made you make the leap from bartender to bar owner? And then how were you able to do it? Because, a lot of people dream of that, but they might not have the money, they might not have the know-how, and you created something really eclectic. So, what made you do it? And then how did you do it? Not the whole story from Sons of Revolution,
right?
But some of the pieces, some are up.
True, and we were, Elaine and I had a phone conversation a couple of days ago, and we talked. I was in the car driving, and we talked for about an hour and 30 minutes. And then she had to go, and I hung up the phone. I said, bless her heart. She's got to be pulling her hair out after listening to me for so long.
I can listen to you talk all day. All day.
But, thanks for being on the show. It's great seeing Struan. He's a new father get a 7-week-old baby at home. It's just wonderful.
I know, mazel tov.
It's wonderful.
Thank you, guys.
So yeah, I was a bartender, and I got really good at it. I developed a good name, and I was making $100 a night bartending. It was really good. It was really cool. And then started making 200, and that was really cool. I met my wife, and people. It's very common for people to say, if you have a girlfriend or someone, you meet their parents. What do you do? So I'm a bartender. Oh, what are you going to do when you get older? And so that was. I always took that personally. It's like, oh, I needed to do something, more substantial. My plan was to go to law school, and I took the LSAT, and I was bartending, and I wanted to go to law school because I fell in love with Megan. I wanted to marry her, and I applied to law school and I got waitlisted. I didn't get in. So then the plan was to reapply, and I had to bump my LSAT score up 2 points, I was told. And in between taking the LSAT again and reapplying for law school, I wanted to get married. So Megan and I got married, and then we thought we would just resume the law school stuff after that. But after we were married, I was ready to. She's beautiful, and I loved her, and from the tip of her soul to the end of her rainbow, to the end of her shadow, she's just beautiful. And I wanted to have kids. So I thought, law school, 3 more years of law school, this time I'm going to cut it. I'll open a bar because people say I'm good at it. So she had a boss, and the boss loaned me $270,000, and I started a bar. And I think y'all don't know me that well, but I think people that know me would think I was going to start like a sports bar and serve chicken wings and all that kind of stuff. But that's not really who I am. Although for some reason I might pigeonhole myself into that kind of character. But I like antiques and art and all these fine European things like Struan likes. And so I created a bar that had all these spirits, and I wanted to make drinks the way they made it before Prohibition and during Prohibition, and with the egg whites and stuff. And that's what I did.
Wow.
And I created this bar, and I thought it was sort of like a swan song, although I wasn't dying. I just wanted it to be really, really, really nice. And it hit it off. It did well. There was the cocktail renaissance was going on. Dale DeGroff had started that renaissance, and Elaine, you were a part of that, and Audrey Saunders and Julie Reiner and lots of people, Sasha Petrosky, and lots of people were involved with this movement. And I remember when Megan's boss asked me about, he wanted a business plan and stuff, and he asked me about the model I wanted to put together. He said, so who's your competition? You got to know your market. And I said, well, my market is New York and Boston and Portland and Seattle. I said, I want to do what they're doing in those places. No one does it in the South. Truly, no one was doing it in the South. And it's 2007. And I said, that's my competition. I want to do, if they're doing it in New York, that's what I want to do. So I would go up to Death & Co. and taste their aviation and all these old drinks and just try to replicate them in the South. But I've been blessed. It's been good. It's been good for me. I enjoy it.
I mean, you have created something really amazing, and I'm glad I've had the pleasure of being there. I look forward to coming back down. And just so you know, my daughter is actually considering UNC. Yeah, she is. She's like, I said, because she liked the campus and stuff. I said, well, I'll have to go back down and visit Gary and do another tour. So she
did, they came down. Yeah, Elaine came down with Philip and their daughter, and she was, maybe she was 15, 16.
Maybe no, I think she was even younger than that. I think she was like 13 to 12 or 13. Yeah,
and the campus is right across the street, and people know us from basketball and football. Well, not so much football, probably basketball. We're known all over, but they don't know us they don't know about the beautiful campus. So we did a little tour. I love showing the place off. I'm a UNC grad.
You really did. You took us to the president's office. Showed us we went to a private basketball practice. No, it was pretty. Cool. It was really, really amazing. Well, Gary, I didn't know that, how you started your bar and why you created that. So thank you. I didn't have a chance to answer that yesterday. It was actually Struan. He's like, I want to know how it come. And I know there's more to this story which we're going to expand upon, like why you have the collection that you have. So we're going to go into, talking about building a brand, because this is something, Gary, you did, and so does Struan, because as much as you said, it was successful, there was definitely some steps you had to take to get people used to the style of drinks you did. And Struan, you were, your career started at a time, not that you're that old, but at a time where social media wasn't such a big thing. You're living in Scotland and then, in Melbourne. So, you built a brand for yourself personally. And it was funny yesterday having this conversation with you. You're like, I forgot about all those things I did. I was like, because, Gary, he explained to me, he's like, well, William Grant just called me up one day and they're like, hey, we were looking for a brand ambassador. And I was like, well, how did they know you existed? Like, what did you do? And he's like, oh, yeah, I never thought about that. I did this, this, and this. So, and this is important. The reason why I want to expand about it, because this show is all about best practices. And a lot of people want to become brand ambassadors. And there are definitely certain things you can be doing in your career right now. If you're working behind a bar and your goal, if it's one day to become a brand ambassador, there's certain things you can be doing to get your name out there and doing it in the right way. And it's not just social media. So Struan, can you just tell us a little bit about your backstory from like when you're in Scotland and you started doing things to build your brand and your knowledge of whiskey, and, your bartending career that they then came and found you?
Yeah. And I think it's really an exercise in following your passion, right? And, when I hear Gary speak, I think you really followed the thing that you cared about the most, your wife and the art and craft of hospitality, right?
Yeah.
So
it's a beautiful
I was in
story.
similar. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, similar boat. I'd done a little bit of bartending in Scotland, and at the same time, like you going into law, I was studying chemistry, applied chemistry, medicinal chemistry, and things like. Thankfully, like back then, I kind of understood it. And I was all set to kind of pursue that as a career. But the more I stepped behind the bar, I was like, wait, there's like elements of this academic thing that I can like talk about with brewing, distilling, whiskey and spirits. Like, I remember we always used to joke like whiskey is a solution, and like in every sense of the word. And so I guess I just got way more experience behind the bar. Obviously, as Elaine mentioned, like moved internationally, like a lot of young Scots, Irish, Europeans, really, like we got such great opportunities to go and work in other countries. Canada, I went to Australia. The scene in Melbourne when I was there was like great coffee, obviously got like a wine industry there. So there's a lot to learn on those fronts, but also just, they had a very professional bartending setup, as in like you got paid pretty well, which makes a big difference. Not like Scotland does not compare even now what you can earn down there. So that point of like, hey, I'm a bartender, but what are you going to do when you really get a job? Right. It didn't count in Australia. It was like you were living expat, so you're a long way from responsibility. It didn't feel like you had to make a decision that soon. So you could really just follow the things that you cared about, which for me was like, I'm a Scottish guy living on the other side of the world. I'm going to learn as much as I can about this, so that when every other bartender is like, hey, rum is this, mezcal is this, craft beer is this, I can at least say like, hey, in single malt, we have flavors like this, and there's diversity, and there's people doing really good things on a small level. It's not all just big brands, and it's not just overly traditional. So I guess I just, I'm not like charming and from the south like Gary, so I just had to learn a lot. And
you have a Scottish accent that you can actually understand, so that takes you.
What you've got to understand in that part of Australia, every second person was Irish or Scottish, so it didn't carry much weight.
That's true.
I say Scottish accent definitely does you all right in America, but there's less of us there. I always remember the guys always used to order from different ends of the bar.
So I know that you, before you went to Australia, you did mention something yesterday that you started getting into whiskey because you live in a whiskey town. You live in a whiskey city, and you started studying whiskey, and you started speaking at some of the whiskey fests and W sets. So expand upon that, because I think that's what kind of, in my mind, probably started putting you on people's radars before you even got to Australia. Or am I wrong? Am I mixing that up?
No, yeah, and I suppose what we're talking about there is brands, right? So like, unless you're going to start your own, which both of you have done successfully. My route into the professional world of whiskey was through working with brands, right? So Scottish whiskey makers at that time were very good at making their product, as they still are, but they maybe weren't that great at reaching the right audience. And you're talking about a time when maybe whiskey's messaging was over traditional, maybe whiskey messaging was very like heather and weather, like here's some tartan, here's some shortbread, have some whiskey, enjoy it, right? So you have maybe a new generation of, like, count myself in this, where you're looking at mixed drinks and you're looking at new occasions to say, like, hey, like, whiskey does have this great diversity. Why don't you think about a highball at brunch? Or why don't you think about, a nice mixed drink before dinner? Because whiskey packs so much flavor, you can be really inventive and experimental with it. Don't be afraid of doing so. So I was probably quite fortunate that, like, just as things were starting to change for the industry in a wider sense, I was probably like confident enough behind the bar, and also, yeah, I really enjoyed, I guess, showing people how accessible the category could be.
Right, and you also studied, right? Go ahead. Sorry, Gary. I was going to say before you answer. Go ahead, Gary.
It's fascinating how whiskey, through the decades and years, they want their Scotch wants their 2010 whiskey to taste like their 1930 whiskey, to taste like their 1890 whiskey. So there's like this traditional purity that they're pushing, and it started. I think it started losing a lot of people. But there's not a better grain than barley that gives us so much different flavors and so much complexity. In America, people talk about bourbon, and it's so popular right now. It's crazy how popular it is. But it doesn't, like the corn and the rye. I don't think it holds anything to what barley does.
Well, I think there was a marketing perception, and you kind of touched upon this, Struan. Scotch was your old man's drink. It was like, for many of us, growing up, it was a drink your dad drank. It was a drink your grandpa drank. It wasn't like young person's drink. And they've done a great job and where in America, rye and bourbon rye obviously can be made anywhere, and so it can but bourbon was our, I hate to say America, it was our America. It was our spirit, and it certainly started becoming hipper because as classic cocktails started taking off. Rye was in there, and that's why rye started growing. Then obviously bourbon is easier to drink if you're not a big drinker than rye. Like, I love a good rye, but it's strong. And whiskey, the single malts, they started becoming sexier, especially if you had, the corporate card or the black card, and then if you're an executive, you're coming out of your MBA school, you needed to know how to drink Scotch. And you needed to know what a good single malt was if you wanted to, go on the golf course with, the executives, because that's what they drank. So it has a strange kind of, it's changing. Like, I'm seeing things like other brands that are creating mixable scotches and things. So it's exciting. There's so much things happening, and the general consumer is starting to embrace it. And I think bourbon's just a good starting place, Gary. They're almost there. They'll make their way to Scotch.
It's like the gateway.
It is definitely the gateway.
Yeah, when I was in my years of bartending since 1992, people want to drink whiskey because they feel like they're supposed to. So I would always start them with like a Irish whiskey because it was really, really easy. I never did the Canadian stuff. But I would always start with the Jameson's or Tullamore Dew or just an Irish whiskey and to get them started, and then work into bourbon. And what I found, I talk about this sometimes, but in my 30 years of bartending, or however long it's been, as a bartender, seeing the guests, there's like a trajectory where they'll start for whiskey, they'll start with an Irish whiskey. And then if they drank a lot, if they drink a lot over years, over 10 years, 15 years, they'll end up with an Islay Scotch. I think their complexity changes so much.
Their taste buds start to get
worn away. Wants more. Your palate demands more. But
your palate definitely demands more, because we need stronger flavors, because I think our palate as we get older also gets a little duller. But I mean, I love a good Islay. So, but I could be wrong. I mean, Struan, you do this every day. So what is your experience like seeing what the consumers are drinking and how they change?
Yeah, my mind is blown right now. I love this tagline, there's no better grain than barley, first of all. And if we're talking best practice, I'm definitely stealing that.
I can't remember who I stole it from.
You know, like the whiskey industry is very sustainable because we've been stealing each other's lines for like, we've been recycling a lot of material, right?
Yeah.
So since Finlay was born, that's January, Gemma and myself, we haven't actually drunk anything since December. I don't know, it's just the way it was. Like, it's very busy, hectic time. I don't know when I would have done. And then during recording today, there was what I thought was a mock whiskey in front of me. So I did a nosing and tasting and drank it. And I was like, oh my God, whiskey is so delicious. This is the best thing ever.
Awesome.
Having not had anything to drink for so long. And yeah, I get this point of progression, like flavor progression and where people end up with their favorites. Like you might start with a lighter tasting whiskey and reach some sort of zenith. Just from the point of view of Glenfiddich, we are like a fairly classic Speyside, which means the whiskey's not going to manifest with a lot of smoke, but should show some good barrel influence, should be fruity, floral, cereal, whatever you want it to be. I guess we quite often find that people go on strange journeys with mezcal and Isla and whatever else you want, dry sherries and things like that, and then quite often come back to us. And it's a quite familiar story where maybe the first whiskey that most people, malt whiskey that most people have tried when I go to a market might be 12-year-old. And then 20 years later, they come back to it and they're like, oh, wow, this is the thing that got me into it. And I can see why. I don't know if that was the answer you're looking for, but that's just from experience.
No, that makes sense. It was more about the progression. But I guess to go back to the original question, if somebody else wanted to be, you got found by Glenfiddich. They sought you out because you did certain things in your career. But if somebody today was listening to the show and they said, I would like a whiskey company to come find me because I love whiskey. Like, what are some things they can be doing now? Like, is there books they should be reading? Is there things they could be doing in their career to get their name out there as somebody who should be taken seriously in the whiskey category?
Yes, but like knowledge is power first and foremost. Like if you go and work for a brand, it's up to them really to train you on the real nuts and bolts of their brand, but you should be able to know everything about the category. It's 2022. There's so much information out there. I was fortunate when I started bartending 99, there was 4 books that you could read that were kind of widely, and once you had them, it was like, wow, great. I feel
What were the books? What were the books?
Well, Michael Jackson was still around, so Michael Jackson's book, Whiskey Companion, Charlie McLean's book, Dave Broom's, and the W set, which Dave also worked on. So there wasn't a huge amount. And then you could get into like, there's a book by Alfred Bernard. I don't know if you've heard of that. That's kind of the original text on whiskey was kind of like dotting around as well. I worked in quite an old style whiskey bar, first of all, and they had a few books behind. So yeah, I would say to people, like, a brand will notice you if you've put in, the effort to learn as much as you can about their category and maybe even show them something they didn't know. And the other thing is just, I think if people are trying to enter into the world of brand work and represent big spirits companies, whatever, think about yourself as a brand and invest in that. So like, we're all familiar with the way that Jack Daniels shows up or Grey Goose shows up. We are familiar with them. If you're a bartender and you want to build your name, start to think about your brand. It's something that a younger generation, they're good at this, right? They're really like, they can build brands online, but also start to think about how you can build it in person. Like, if you have a meeting with someone and you need to be on time, you need to attire yourself properly, you need to like be able to be professional, not just when you're on screen, because this is an easier interaction, right? You can edit yourself in your videos. You can pitch up in a hotel room like I am and talk to lots of people around the world, but one-on-one, you have to be able to really like convey to people a lot of confidence in what you're doing. And it's not that easy, but if you're bartending, it's something you can work on, right?
Yeah.
No, absolutely. If you're bartending, you could be practicing. Somebody told me, Nathan Rafael, he was on here. He's a brand ambassador for Bacardi, and he said the way he got better at presenting, because he thought he was an amazing bartender, and then he realized that he bartended with his head down, and he never really talked to anybody. He was fast, but he didn't know how to communicate, and he started doing competitions. And the competitions forced him to look up. They forced him to talk and engage to somebody while they were presenting a drink, and that really helped him enhance his speaking skills to be able to present yourself to another person, because we all text all day, and to be able to speak eloquently and be able to pronounce that word, which I cannot, you need to be able to practice all the time and having conversations. I mean, Gary, this is one of your gifts is this. I mean, how did you get good at, you are able, like the article you sent me was literally, it says, Gary can sit and talk to you about anything, anytime, and you could just sit with them all. And I could sit with you all day. You have a charm and able to be a great host, and to make somebody feel very welcomed and engaged. Like, I have your attention. So is it something you just learned, or is this something you practiced over years behind the bar?
I think it's, I think what you see here is me. And I think I'm pretty authentic, and I know I'm genuine. I try to shoot people straight. But now it hadn't been, in the 90s, I've always been vulnerable, showed my vulnerability, and I've always led with my heart, not so much here. And then there's this constant struggle or battle between, am I smart, or do I feel good? There's all this back and forth. So the past 5 years, I've learned that I'm leading with my heart, and that's the way to go. And don't worry about thinking or the brain stuff, which I've always done. I've always led with my heart. So I've always showed vulnerability. Now, in the 90s, when I was bartending, I was the same person I am now, but the people are different. Like, I couldn't say when I was bartending, oh, I was depressed. They would say, oh, Gary, leave that at the door. That's not hospitality. You can't, once you walk through the door, it's like, leave your personal stuff at the door, And my bosses would tell me that. But then once I owned my own bar, because I own it, I own the thing. I can do what I want. It's got my name on it. It's got my name on it.
It's the Crunkleton Bar.
Yeah, so I can do what I want. And so I thought it was okay to be vulnerable. I thought vulnerability is who I am, and that's how I'm gonna make my staff. And then I even think now that when I open new places or consult, I talk about service as IQ. The fork goes on the left, the glass goes here, but hospitality is EQ, emotional quotient. And now that stuff's really hip and popular. There's this guy that is ghostwriting. He and I talked about writing a book together. People ask you if you want to write a book. And I don't really want to write a book, but because I don't think anyone would care what I have to say. But I
think you should write a book.
Well, this stuff here is what I care about, the EQ and IQ stuff in our business. So they matched me with a writer, because I don't even read. I read the Bible, but I didn't even read it from front to back. But I'm not a big reader. I do these audio books. So I thought, well, hell, if I don't read,
me too.
How in the world am I going to write a book? It doesn't make sense. It's not my thing. They said, well, we'll get someone to write the book for you. And then it made sense, because I have people, Struan, people too. All you, Elaine, people that have books out there. And I'm thinking, I've had drinks with that person. He is not, or she is not smart enough to write a book, but they have somebody else. Anyway, so the ghost author, the writer, what we're working on, he says, Gary, you need to get your homework done, because this EQ stuff is really getting popular. Brene Brown.
And what does EQ stand for again, Gary? Sorry.
Emotional quotient. Emotional quotient. So, and I have a high EQ because I lead with my heart. Now, in the 90s, that wasn't good. If I said that I was depressed when I'm bartending, if I said I was depressed, the bartenders wouldn't want to hear that. I mean, the customer didn't want to hear that. Well, there's the ones that drank around 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they didn't mind the conversation. But the ones that were, coming out to celebrate at night, they didn't want to hear that. So I had to pipe that down. And oftentimes I would open myself up and reveal like what I cared about, and then they would just prey on it. But in the after the second decade of 2000s, 2010 and on, stuff became fashionable. So I remember my father passed, my dad died, and I had to go on the bar. I got a bartend, so I had to go to work. And I did not want to be there.
Oh my God, no!
I didn't want to be there, and I didn't get along with my dad that well. And it was a slow process. And so and my friend Robert, his father had pancreatic cancer, so he was my best friend, and so I was in like the passenger seat for his father dying. So there were things that I learned from that experience that I did on my own with my father, because his process was a lot slower. And then he finally died, and I was a wreck. I would just cry like a drop of a hat. So I had to bartend. And I get in there, and my first guest, I call them guests, I don't call them customers. My first guest comes in, and he said, "Hey, how's it going?" I said, "It's okay, you know." And I just unloaded, which I'm sure you can imagine after talking to him on the phone yesterday or 2 days ago, and now. But I said, I don't want to be here. My pop just died, but I own the bar. I got to work. It's got to be open. We got kids at private school. I got to make money. And the guy said, "Man, I know what you feel like. I got you. My father passed away 2 years ago." And so that guest and he starts coming in now. And
wow.
So we use that vulnerability as a bridge between the two people. And we built a relationship on that. So it's, there's power.
That's amazing. I do think there is definitely power. Part of being charming is about being vulnerable and letting other people in. And there's probably, the wrong guests probably wouldn't appreciate, your conversation. And I would always, that's something that I would, it would bond with me. So I guess it all depends on who you're talking to, but I love that, Gary. And that's what I love about you. I think that's why people enjoy your company so much, because you do lead from the heart. I don't even know where to segue from this.
Well, let me segue because there was a question here that I didn't answer. So building your brand, Struan answered it from the manufacturer side, the creator side. I'll answer it from the retail side. So those of you that want to be brand ambassadors, which is you wash dishes, then you bar back, and then you become a bartender, and then you want to maybe be a brand ambassador, or you can maybe want to be an owner, however you want to do it. But I suggest those of you that want to build your brand, I would just stick with what you know and just be authentic as you can be. And if you're passionate, that's even better, because it's a shitty world out there, and people love passion. Because everybody is hungry to be excited about something. And if you can find out what it is, regardless of what it is, whether it's growing rice or selling Rika vodka, whatever it is, I don't know why I said growing rice, but whatever it is, just find and go with it.
Hey, it's a thing, go ahead.
And then if you find, once you're doing your experiment, once you're doing your research, don't go to the bar and get drunk. Always be professional. And because you could build a brand on being fun and popular and all that, but I think that can go pretty easily. I think if you want staying power, I would try to be as genuine and honest as you can be. And I would drink a lot of different spirits, because I think it all starts with the palate. If you have a good palate and you can tell why this whiskey tastes the way it does and why that whiskey tastes the way it does, I think if you can do that, you can easily go ahead of the class, I think.
I love that. You also made a comment the other day, and Struan, I would love to hear your thoughts, because you have to interview a lot of people and meet a lot of brand ambassadors. I'm sure you've seen some good ones, or you mentored some people coming up, and Gary, you mentioned, there are definitely good brand ambassadors and not so great brand ambassadors, ones that need a lot of polishing, or you just know they're just not going to make it because maybe they party too hard, or they don't take the job serious enough. They don't have the passion that they need, or they're not taking the time to learn the category, because you do need to make that effort. And Gary, you said to me, sometimes, people come in, they're representing a brand, but they don't know anything about it, or they don't know about the category. So, why is that, is that something common, like, that you see, and why is a bar owner, I mean, it's probably obvious, why does that turn you off?
It's unique where I am. I'm in North Carolina when we're a control state. So some could argue that there's no reason to have a brand ambassador. They can't do anything. And then some could argue that, you need them. Us bar owners and bartenders, we need guidance. We need someone to bring in that coffee flavored Jameson that just came out, or the Glenmorangie that just the X that they just lowered. They watered down so they can charge less money, and you can mix it in drinks.
That was brutal.
No, I didn't. Was that bad?
That was a bit brutal.
Well, how else are you supposed to get a product that normally costs $60 and then they can sell it for $40?
That's true. Just sorry, that was just funny. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you out, but yeah, go ahead. So,
it's like if you're, well, never mind. But
we'll get into like the qualities. I mean, I'll go into Struan for a second. So, Struan, okay. What do you think makes a great brand ambassador?
I honestly could just sit and listen to Gary talk for a few hours. So I'm really just enjoying this like mentorship that's going on. And Gary, if you don't release your audiobook, then the world is missing out on some real wisdom that you have there. So yeah, this has been like just very enjoyable to listen to. The one thing I would just maybe add to what we're talking about is memorability and just standing out. And we all probably have experiences in our lives where we've walked into great bars and every single touch point has just been so wonderful that we're like, oh my God, this is just like imprinted. Given all the bars that we've all worked in, and between the three of us, there must be a few thousand there. One of the most important parts of that process and of that entire ecosystem is the personality of a bartender or a host. And it's the same for people that end up representing brands, right? So you can be the most intelligent, knowledgeable person in the room, but if people are switching off when you're talking and you're not putting it across in your own words, then it's not going to carry. And I'll give you an example. I moved from working in the Asian market. I was there for 3 years, presenting to Koreans, Japanese, Chinese, all across the region. And I then did my first presentation in the US. I was in DC. And we did this big whiskey club at the Reagan Library. And I'm like loving this. I was on like a pedestal, and we did the full tourist thing beforehand and walked around your capital, and then did this presentation. And, an hour, I hit I hit them with so many figures and so many dates and so many facts. And I was like, God, I'm flying here.
Yeah.
And then I hand over to the audience, and I was like, do you guys have any questions? And the first one in America was like, Struan, this was great. We've learned a lot about Glenfiddich, but we don't know anything about you. And America showed me that, like, not only do you need to be able to sell the story of the brand you represent, in my case is a whiskey, but you also need to be able to bring to life your story. I mean, Gary's a great example of that. And you talk very openly about your journey. And it's, it's great to see like a man in your position be able to openly talk about your journey, right? I'm kind of put in the spot in that respect because I'm in front of 100 people, and I'm like, nobody cared in Asia. They just like, here's a Scottish guy, he's pouring whiskey, this is great, because that's the progression that they were at in terms of what they wanted from a brand. I know it's changed now, and the consumer, the guests in Asia now want a lot more storytelling and a lot more involvement. But America really showed me like you need to be able to tell your story as well as a brand story.
No, I love that. So it's catering your message to your audience and knowing your audiences and figuring out like, all right, it's a different, because even in America, or I'm sure even in Europe, depending on the level of knowledge of the group, you have to change what you're talking about. But the fact that, you know, in America, they said, hey, we want to know a little bit more about you, is an important thing to know, because I definitely learned that when I was able to go through presentation training. You know, they said you need to come up with something to say about you so they know why they should be listening to you. Like, who are you, and why does it matter? Like, why do the words coming out of your mouth have any credibility if we don't know who you are and your backstory? Sadly for me, my credibility only came from the fact that I was on Bar Rescue. And that is the saddest fact about my career. People are like, oh, she was on Bar Rescue TV. If you're the consumer, she must be amazing. And I'm like, that's the saddest reason. I'm like, let's talk about all the schooling and studying I've done and all the courses I've taken and all the bars I've been around the world. That's what makes me credible. That does not make me credible, but that's all that needed to be said. So it made my life easier on that fact. But
there's a very long joke, which I won't tell right now, in Scotland about a guy that, shall we say, gains his name for his fondness of sheep. It's a very long joke that maybe we'll save for another time. Otherwise, I'll take up the rest of this.
I look forward to hearing that joke over a whiskey. But Gary, I do want to get back to you. I just wanted to give you a minute to think about it, because about the, you know, one brand ambassador, you were saying brand ambassadors are important for North Carolina, like in a control state, because
yeah,
why?
they are.
Why do you?
Well, they can be important because I think a control state's a great place to launch a new product. So if you have a product that you want to move, you know, North Carolina is a good place for it, because they allow so much stuff in. You don't have to worry about the distributor, you know, being at the mercy of what the distributor brings in. North Carolina will bring it in. So I think that's cool. There's a girl named Dow who's wonderful. She's a wonderful, and there's a guy named Joseph who's really, really good. There's probably, you know, out of the 100 that I've met, there's 10% are probably really, really, really good. A lot of them come and go and change. They move. I don't know. Struan, do you have anything like control? I guess they don't have. You know what a control state is, Struan?
Just literally from my time in the US, I think we kind of got our heads around it, but there's no equivalent in Scotland. Internationally, we do deal with dark markets. So France, for example, Thailand, just places where you can't advertise, no above the line, some below the line, and you have your own challenges there. Like you said, it can be a good place to test and learn, launch a product, for example. And it is also a good showcase of where a hand sell, like an actual person going in to call on an account, is more important than, you know, a bigger marketing or media investment. So yeah, there are dark markets internationally, and I got to know them like via the US system, certainly.
And Norway is kind of, and yeah, Gary, wondering, because Norway is a kind of a controlled state, because you can only buy from the government in Norway, as far as I know, right?
It's a monopoly, good old system belaget in Scandinavia. Yeah. So we as brands sell into the government, and it's up to the government to list what we have. I guess Ontario up in Canada, similar thing, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone kind of has its own challenges.
So
control states in the US state. Remind me.
Yeah, exactly. So Gary, to explain what a control state is, I know that was one of the questions, because I don't know if everybody knows.
So in North Carolina, and I think there's 13 or 14 of them. After Prohibition, they said, okay, we'll allow liquor sales, but the state's going to regulate it. The state's going to control it. And so we have a state control board, North Carolina ABC. And then there's also 100 counties in North Carolina. So they gave the counties a bone, or the different municipalities a bone, so they could have control over the alcohol, locally. So if I want, like right now, everyone complains about a lot of Buffalo Trace products. The ones, the Wellers and the antique collections and the Pappies, everybody wants those. And they might not come, or there's a small allocation to North Carolina, and it comes through the state. And people think that, I think I'm going to get off track, but just cut me off, Elaine, if I do. But people might think that oh, it's the North Carolina control that allows us not to be able to get those things, but it's not. There's an allocate. There's only so much, and they allocate it based on your previous sales of the year before. So New York might get. I mean, there's a lot of people in New York, so New York might get the most of it, or Detroit, Michigan, or Chicago, or whatever. And then North Carolina gets their small allocation. So we get all these things. We just don't get that much of it. But so the state controls it, and then the county boards can control it. So whatever we order has to be. There's no salesperson. There's no person that can say, hey, if you buy 3 bottles, I'll give you 2. You know, if you buy a case, I'll give you a free case. Or there's no deals like that. Now I've consulted in other states, and I guess free market the states are what you call it. And I've been limited. I could get whatever I want in North Carolina. I can get whatever I want. I got the Old Duff Geneva in North Carolina. We can get whatever we want, which is a benefit. You just have to know how to get it. You have to know how to navigate the system.
And how do you find out about products? Explain to people how you find out about what's out there in the world. I mean,
I taste. I have a good.
But how do you know what to taste?
If I hear about something, my friend, you know, when you have friends that are in New York and the big cities and stuff, and like the Italicus.
You look at awards, right? You said you look at award shows.
Well, not so much anymore, but I used to. When I started in 2007, I looked at the San Francisco Spirits competition, and it was a new competition, and if something got a double gold, I was getting it. My bar I treated it like it's like if you walk into a liquor store and you wish, oh man, I wish I could taste that, but you can't. You have to buy the whole bottle. So I wanted all these spirits. So when you walk in, you can do the same thing. You can have the same fascination about spirits, and then you can buy a shot and taste it. So that was kind of the idea when I built the place. And to build that wall of liquor, I would look at the San Francisco Spirits competition, and if they got a double gold, I would buy it, regardless of the category. I would buy, unless it was like soju, I would buy it. Yeah, but I stopped doing that. I don't do that as much anymore. But now I just taste stuff. I thought this Italicus would be. I thought Italicus was going to be the next Saint Germain. I really did, and I got it. I tasted it up in Washington D.C. I'd heard about it. I tasted it up in Washington D.C. and it's this bergamot, and I thought, man, it's gonna be the next Saint Germain, and I bought a lot of it, and it's not the next Saint Germain. The flavors are a little too subtle, so it's easy to get bullied. The Italicus is easy to get bullied when you mix it with other stuff. It's easy for it to lose that flavor. We have a honeysuckle.
It works well with milk punch. Try it with milk punch. I've seen milk punch.
Okay.
Yeah, with milk with Italicus. I like. I've had some good drinks with it, and it makes a good spritz. That's what I've seen being the popular thing. But for yourself, so would a brand ambassador have any influence on you? On like, so coming into a North Carolina state, like Struan came in there, he met you there. That's how you guys got to know each other.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
And you mentioned to me yesterday, you know, there are definitely certain types of brand ambassadors that you like, and you really like the brand ambassadors from William Grant, because they're not pushy, but they're knowledgeable. Would that kind of sum it up? Is that what is that your ideal brand ambassador?
Yeah, for me, I like a brand ambassador that knows the product, knows the category, and can show me why I should buy their product, why I should have it. I like that brand ambassador. When we first started, there was a question about this, but we didn't get to it. When we first started, the cocktail renaissance wasn't in the South, and it hadn't moved to the South yet. Even in Atlanta, it wasn't in Atlanta. So I didn't have a market for these old world style drinks that had the herbaceous bitterness flavor, you know, not as sweet. You remember the 80s?
I know the question you're getting to, and I'm glad you're getting there. So basically, how you built. We were talking about how to build a personal brand, and you were going to talk about how you built the brand of your bar, because you built it in a place where cocktails hadn't made it yet. So yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So I had this dream or this plan to have this wall of liquor, and everybody, just the guests coming in and saying, "Oh, I'll have that. I'll have that cognac. The Louis." We had all these things, and the cognac didn't move. It never moved. So I ended up just giving that away or something. But we had all these spirits and all these just a plethora of flavors, all different types of flavors for everybody. The Cosmopolitan was good. That was a popular drink. So I started making Cosmos with gin. And then if someone ordered a Cosmo, I would say, try the Aviation. Once I was able to get the Luxardo in, when I got the Luxardo coated and I could get Luxardo, then I had two drinks. I had the Aviation and I had the Last Word. And the Last Word is a tough drink in 2008. It's a tough drink to sell because of that bitterness. It's like people say, oh, it's an acquired taste. Well, that's another way of saying it's not any good. Or
it's interesting.
It's interesting. Oh, it's interesting. This is interesting. Yeah. So I had all this wall of liquor, and I was excited. I had the staff trained, and we were ready to go. And people are still ordering Makers and Ginger and Jack and Cokes. So I had to teach them. So what I did was, I reached out to people, and I knew I was geeking out about it. I knew, Elaine, I knew you. I knew your name. We didn't know each other, but I knew your name. I didn't know Struan. But I'd met Charlotte Voisey, Dale DeGroff, Bernie Lubbers, all these big hitters in the industry. And when I met them, Charles Pickle,
Paul Pickle.
Paul Pickle. When I met him, I thought, I'm going to invite them to the bar because I got to teach my market. I got to create a market for this. Now I knew that my market in Chapel Hill, as tiny as it is, I knew there were discerning palates there because we had the first or the second craft brewery in North Carolina was in Chapel Hill. We had 3 restaurants that were semifinalists in the James Beard nomination. So I knew that the market was ready for something better. And I knew these classic cocktails or craft cocktails, I knew that they're better. It's a better drink quality wise. They're not over sweetened. There's not really a synthetic flavor in them. So I was excited about that. But people are still drinking freaking Jack and Cokes and Makers and Gingers, and it was just upsetting. So I had to bring people in. So I brought Charlotte Voisey in, and I brought Dale in first, and I consider Dale a mentor. I don't know if he would claim me, but I learned a lot from him. And then Charlotte Voisey, I brought her in, and I consider her a mentor. I don't know if she'll claim me, but I brought her in. And then Bernie Lubbers, I brought him in, and I consider him a mentor for bourbon. So I had these people that would do these events, and we charged them. We sold tickets, and I wasn't in bed with all these different brands because the brands can pay. A lot of these accounts, hey, let's do a vanilla vodka event. Well, that's not really my thing. That's not the market I'm trying to build. Or let's do what's that? Fireball. Let's do Fireball. Or can I get Fireball and Red Bull? No, not here. But there's a bar for you next door. If you want to do that. So I was trying to build this particular market while serving A to Z, and it was hard. It took about 1.5 years to do, and to build this market. And the way I did it was I invited people down. So I wanted to do a Scotch event, and Glenfiddich William Grant had a couple, Mitch Bouchard. I don't know if I'm pronouncing their names correctly, and Dave Blackmore. I think they were with Glenfiddich, and I think, and Charlotte Voisey said, because I would go through Charlotte. Charlotte says, "Oh, there's this guy Struan Grant Ralph," and I didn't know because sometimes it's like Struan Grant and then Ralph, like Common Ralph, and the guy's name is Ralph, or is it one of these hyphenated names? Is it Struan Grant Ralph?
I did call him Ralph.
Yeah. Like the mom was Grant and the dad was. I didn't know. I was nervous as hell. When I get nervous, I sweat. So he comes down. And we do this. He's totally cool. He's so cool. He's like 6'4", good looking. He's so cool. He's got this. He's got the kilt on and nothing underneath. That's a joke. And he's just a cool guy. He's a really, really cool guy. And I'm running around like a rat, sweating, trying to make sure each guest is happy and smiling. And Struan just looks at me and goes, "Hold on, take a breath. We got this." And he just commands this attention. He engages the guests, and he teaches them something about whiskey. And Glenfiddich is a great whiskey. It's a great whiskey. And I train with Glenfiddich. If you get the lineup, the 12 all the way through to the we have the 30 year at my bar. We don't train with that one. I don't think there's a 25 year. I don't think there's a 25 year, but we stop at the 21, which is in rum casks. But we're just steady Eddie. Like if you want to know, like if you say, "Hey, what does a 12-year Scotch taste like?" Then you pour the Glenfiddich, and you'll get a good idea. Even better than the Balvenie. The Balvenie could switch. It could change. It's not as powerful to me, but the Glenfiddich is just delicious, I think, with the complexity.
No, but I love that. So the impact that he made on you. I mean, this is what 7 years later. You're still here, but also the fact that you met Charlotte and you brought people in to do these tastings with your guests, and you trained your market. Literally built your market. It's kind of like Audrey Saunders at Pickle Club refused to serve vodka at all. And it wasn't because she didn't like vodka. It was because she was trying to train her guests in 2005 to ask for something else besides vodka. So she just refused to sell it. But the fact also you reach out to your resources, and this is a great example of what brand ambassadors, if they're good at what they do, that are a great resource for, because you brought Struan in, you never met, and he was moving in the United States at that point after living in Asia. Right, Struan, and then you'd be brought back to down south to do this whiskey tasting. That must have been quite a thing to come down there. It was your first time in the South, Struan?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, though, this works both ways. So Gary said he really likes ambassadors that come in and don't sell him anything, and you referenced Charlotte there. Charlotte Boyce is one of the reasons that we met, because I mentioned to her that I was going to North Carolina, and she said, "Well, you forget everything else. You just need to go and see this one guy, Gary, and take it from there." So this is like one of the reasons that I was, buzzing and stoked to meet you. You're very kind with your compliments on how we hosted a room, but honestly, once you put a kilt on, people tend to listen to you for like a good long while. It's like the Yankees used to win because of the striped uniform. Well, as soon as you get a kilt on, and I mean, people just are like, "Okay, this guy's going to talk about whiskey. I'm into it." This is like maybe 2014, 2015. I guess we don't wear the kilt so much anymore. Third thing is, like, as ambassadors, Gary and bar owners like you and operators like you are the dream, because we want to get out there and not train people. We just want to go out and talk about category. We don't even really want to sell our brand. We just want to go out and be like, "Hey, these people are passionate and willing to learn, and they're going to put aside an hour. Maybe the staff are coming in on their day off. Maybe they're pulling in a few different bars together." That, to an ambassador, is the ideal operator, owner, business, but whatever. Because you just said there that you love ambassadors that do these things, but it works both ways, Gary, right? And you've made yourself like, I guess, quite humble in a way, where you said, like, "Oh, I just want to learn from the best. I want to learn from the people that are coming in." That is the ideal. It's the way that we all kind of progress and share this knowledge. And it's even just sitting here, it's one of the reasons I love this industry that we're in, because there's so much to learn, right? And there's so many interesting parts to it that, like, I know a lot of people on here will be looking for jobs, and if they are going after an ambassador route, fine. But there's also loads of other things that you can do in spirits marketing and operating. So if you don't want to don a kilt and talk about Scotch, there is an infinite amount of things that happen in spirits world. And an infinite amount of jobs that you might be able to slot into. So there you go.
We were
we were doing this too. That. Go ahead,
we were doing this too, where the bar took the lead. We paid. I paid to get Dale DeGroff here. Charlotte, I didn't have to pay. And then Struan I didn't have to pay because the company paid. But a lot of these things that we do that we put together, we charge for the event. So they have to be quality. I mean, they have to be quality. They have to be a good value so that we can sell the ticket and then justify doing the event. And they come all the time. The people come all the time. Not the brand ambassadors come all the time, and they want to do an event pushing something. And to me, it's the first thing I ask myself is, am I just doing this event to bring people in the bar, or am I doing this event to give them a great experience? And if it's just to bring them in the bar, then I won't do it. And there have been some brands out there that haven't been all that exciting, but are really, really, really good. So, the presenter may not have been all that engaging. Struan was talking earlier about all these facts and dates, and when he was making his presentation in New York, I think you can get lost in all that minutia if you're a common lay person. So I like things to be smart enough that the person has to elevate, like esteem towards, and dumb enough so everybody can relate to it. Like I used to prescribe to Esquire magazine or subscribe, and I would have a dictionary next to me because in every 8th word I didn't even know what the hell it meant. I can look it up.
I know. Philip Racy in New Yorker, and
I'm learning.
It's in depth. No, and that is a great point, because being a great presenter does take that. It takes that skill set of being able to elevate, right? Just talk high enough, right? That the consumer, or the average tradesperson who might not be really a geek, not a geek, but somebody who's really has studied everything in such a deep level is going to ask you those questions about, the yeast and the reflux and go to a whole another level to be able to just elevate enough so everybody feels like they took away something. And then, but, giving enough storytelling so it remains interesting. It's not an easy thing to do. And it takes a lot of training and a lot of learning. Like just me doing these, I'm now rewatching some of my old episodes because we're turning all these into a podcast. So I have to do the editing notes. And I cringe sometimes listening to some of the things that I've said. And some other people have said it, because it does take time and practice, and you really need to learn how to cater your message to the audience. I cringe when I have to give a presentation to the trade, when I know that trade is at a whole nother level than I am. It's one of the reasons I got out of the cocktail game, because the cocktail industry had surpassed me. I was like, I don't know anything about molecular mixology or I can make classic cocktails all day and yummy drinks, but I don't know the next level, and I don't work behind a bar. I'm not going to take myself to the next level. So this is not a game I want to play in anymore. So I got out, and I spend time doing other things, especially focusing on brand ambassadors, because I find it really interesting, especially the human factor. This is something, being able to talk to people like yourselves all day is one of my favorite things to do, and learning and hearing great stories from you, Gary. It's been a pleasure. But it is a skill set, and practice is the only way you get better. But Gary, you also touched on something about, I think this is something, and Struan, you said it too, you love doing that, right? Gary is the ideal account because you get to share your knowledge and your education. And as a operator, Gary, you are open to that. You understand that there are resources out there, and you're looking for them to come into your bar to enhance the experience for the customer, for your bartenders. And I think that's an incredible thing. I don't think everybody realizes that there is such a resource to tap into. I mean, Struan, how often do you get asked to come to bars to do brand presentations? Back in the day, before.
Historically, it was. I assume what you're getting at is a lot, but that was kind of like, that's what you did for a living. And I think with all of these audiences that we've been talking about, trade, consumer, anybody, everything that we do as hosts of a podcast or hosts of a bar or someone who works for a brand, it's all about how you're making people feel at the end of the day. So even if you're addressing a very, very skilled group of bartenders, accepting that you maybe don't know as much as they do is a really important thing, that humble thing. And if you're addressing like a room full of people that are just getting into a category, letting them know that like if you want to go to a very geeky level, you can, but you're going to entertain them on that point as well. And I think like realizing very early that how people feel is the most important thing in everything that we do, that EQ, that sense of relatability. Everything else will fall into place. And that's the wonderful thing about what we do in hospitality, right? The bottom line is how people are feeling, happy emotional responses, right?
No, I love that. Well, I'm going to ask for advice. If you don't know, and I'd love to hear both of you, if you're in a room, have you ever been in that room where you're not sure? I definitely know I have, where I've been in a room and I'm like, wow, they might know more than I have. And I've heard this from many brand ambassadors. The time that they sweat the most when they're stressing out is when they're presenting to the trade, because they're afraid of that. How do you admit to that? Like, or is it just like, hey, if I say something that might not be 100%, let me know. Or if you have a point to add to something I'm saying, I would love to hear it, maybe not in the middle of my presentation, but, maybe afterwards that we can talk about. Like, have you ever been in that situation, and do you have any advice?
Oh my God. One of my first.
Oh, he just cut out.
Oh no!
Don't cut out now.
He just froze.
John, Struan, you just froze.
Elaine, I was there's this group of computer hackers in Chapel Hill. It's not anonymous, but it's like that anonymous group, and they do a convention every year, and they all get together, and they're real smart. They're computer people. They're really, really smart. And I did a Scotch. They asked me to come over to the place and do a Scotch tasting, and there were about 13 of them there, and they all had these iPads. I mean, they're savvy computer people. They always have these little iPads, and so I'm doing the presentation, and I'm talking about the different whiskeys that we poured. I think we did an international whiskey. I think we did an internet, like whiskeys around the world. So we had stuff from Taiwan and Italy and Scotland and Japan. And so we're doing that. And I think what they're doing, I think that they're checking like, oh, well, this says you have, on their laptop because they're doing it then with the laptop, which is natural for them. And I was nervous. And like, so I remember thinking, man, I'm going to say it tastes like apple, and it's going to say pear. So it's really, really similar, pear and apple are pretty similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm thinking, oh God, should I say pear? I don't know what that website says, or should I say apple? But yeah, and technology is getting better. The consumers are getting savvier. They're getting smarter, which is great for me because, I have the 500 bottles of liquor on the wall, and I need them to know, what different spirits taste like. I remember, you probably remember these days, there was a period in 2009, 2008, when we didn't know if mezcal was spelled with a Z or an S. It was spelled both ways. But now everyone uses Z. I don't know what happened to the S, but it was at some point, it was a legitimate way to spell mezcal. But
so wait, when you're in that situation with the no, I love that. I actually do remember that. And people weren't sure, and it's like the endless argument about whiskey, with the E or without the E, and right. And then people nerding out. Is it Moet or Moet? That was the other one. I said to correct people because I learned it was Moet because I was like, oh, the owner is Dutch. It's a Dutch guy and a French guy got together, but Moet is actually a Dutch name, and that's why you pronounce the et. And that's why it's not silent. And I felt so knowledgeable when I found that out. I was like, yes, I know something. But do you remember when you were at that group of the whiskey, looking at things? Did anybody call you out when you were speaking to all those guys?
No, this was all, I don't know what they were looking at. They could have been playing word Scrabble. I have no idea what they were looking at on the computers because I couldn't see them. But I thought that that's what they were doing. Like my insecurities came out. I was doing a presentation once where from this, it was at the a bookstore about a book on spirits. The guy had written a book about spirits, and the bookstore asked me to come in and talk. And I'm doing my presentation, and there's a woman sitting on the front row, and I would say something, and she goes, "Yeah, that's right." And I'm thinking to myself, why in the hell is that woman? Does she know all this already? What is she doing here? Like, why is she doing this presentation if she knows all this information? Because she kept going like this. Yep, that's right. And my wife, and I was going to say something because I would stop myself and say, "Man, what are you doing here? You seem to know all this stuff already." But I didn't. My wife told me that some people just have those mannerisms, like when they're talking, they go,
Yes, true.
So, but you don't know.
As I'm doing it to you right now. Ooh,
no, you're doing it to me right now.
I'm doing. There's Struan.
Yay! Like the phoenix rising from the ashes.
Oh, I crashed and burned as well. I got knocked off the internet here.
So we were talking about we were saying, do you have any advice if you are presenting to a room of people that you think just might have more knowledge than you, or they try to pretend they have more knowledge than you, like they try calling you out on things, I guess, or they just, or you just know, you're not sure, like, these people might be on a different, when you first got into whiskey, I'm sure you made presentations to a room where people might have had greater expertise than you did.
Yeah,
any advice?
And I love this question because it is really nerve-wracking. And the story I was actually starting to tell was addressing a group of bartenders in Singapore when the owner of our business walked into the hotel. And he's the fourth generation of the Grant family, and I'm literally telling a story about one of his forebears, and I'm now like I'm now in a situation where I'm talking about like his family, and suddenly I sort of freeze. And no, he was very gracious with it, and it was my first experience of we represent like a great family business, and there are direct descendants of our founder who you will work with now and again. I was also rather awkwardly in a position at Whiskey Live Shanghai one year where I was introduced on stage as William Grant, obviously with the first name being a little bit confusing, and one of our owners was at that event as well, so that was slightly awkward. But I think just the point about addressing an audience which is very like knowledgeable or an audience which is intimidating, I think you just have to have some fun with it, right? And just say like, hey, I know there's a lot of people in this room who could definitely like make this thing that I'm talking about, or who have like a lot of experience, so feel free to chime in. This just happens to be the way I'm going to present it. And it's I think some audiences in our industry that are very, very nerve-wracking, right?
And it's great. It's great that the public is, the market's aware, and they're getting smarter, because this is bigger than us. This industry is a lot bigger than us. And for me, for selfish reasons, the smarter my market is, the more money I'll make, because I have all that liquor on the wall. I got to move it.
And absolutely, and no, it's a great part. It is they are getting more knowledgeable, so you can't just bullshit even when you're going into a consumer audience. Like back in the day, you could pretty much say anything and they would believe what you said because they didn't have any other reference. You really do need to know your facts now. So you do have to over prepare sometimes. And if somebody knows something, I've had to learn this because Don Lee from our industry and called me out on one or two things. He's like, that fact you said was wrong. And I was like, he said that we waited till afterwards. And I was like, well, it was off by like 2 years. And my younger self was like, oh, it's not a big deal. And he very quickly corrected me. And he said, Lane, it is a big deal because you speak in such a commanding way. People are writing down these facts that you're saying, and they're going to go on and tell somebody else. So if you're wrong, then they're going to be wrong, and they're going to keep sharing this information because you told them that was it. And I was like, that is a very valid point, and I should take what I'm saying much more seriously, because I was always like, it's just drinks. We're not curing cancer. It's fine. And then I realized, like, no, you do have a responsibility to share. And if you don't know something, just say, I don't know. And it's not, which is never easy to do. All right, gentlemen, we've been talking for a while and it's been such an amazing conversation. And sadly, we're going to have to wrap it up because I have to catch a plane. I always like to end on this one thing, which is words of advice. So, Struan, any last words of advice for brand ambassadors that may be in the field now, or others, or you can choose somebody who wants to be a brand ambassador? What would be your word of advice? And it can't be love the brand, because everybody says that one.
Just, challenge yourself. Get outside your comfort zone. Get a cute dog like Gary has there. My God, we could have been talking about that.
I know, so cute.
And honestly, if brand ambassadorship is what you want to get into, there is literally loads out there. So just follow the thing that you're interested in, and eventually, the spirit of this, literally the spirit of this earth will kind of guide you into something that you have earned. Because if you just have passion and interest for things, it's brilliant. Like even just this hour and a half that we've spent talking here, it just really motivates me and inspires me, which is such an important thing if you're going to do a job which is kind of out of the normal, like ambassadorship. So yeah, just
I think that's great advice. So getting out of your comfort zone, go for the thing you like and follow your passion. If you are really passionate about it, dive into it. And there's probably a job out there, lots of brands are looking, and you might have to move to get it, but there are, I love that. So, and Gary, for you, if you're any tips for bartenders getting out there who might want to open their own bar?
I would say go home after your shift. Don't stay and drink for 5 hours. Always be honest. Watch the credit card debt, because that compounding interest can paralyze you. So live within your means. And most importantly, which it seems like this is the way this new generation is, don't be driven by bottom line, by money. Don't be driven by money. Be driven by what's good. I think that, our parents, my parents, it was like, how strong is your back? If you got a good back and you're a laborer, you can be successful. And then later on, it was like your brain. If you're really, really good with numbers and you're smart, you're going to be successful. I think what's coming ahead of us is your heart. I think if you can push your heart and be one with your feelings and your heart. I know it sounds sappy, and it might not seem genuine coming from a 300-pound guy that's 5'4", but
if anybody knows you, Gary, it's very, very, very genuine. So
I would lead with your heart.
We do love you, and to build on it, lead where your heart, and be patient with people. People are very quick to jump on people these days and take them down because they've made mistakes, and you don't know what their backstory is and what their education was and where they came from. So, don't be so quick. Don't be so quick to criticize somebody. You just don't know, find out, see, ask them first, get to know them a little more, ask them questions to before you decide to just, just dismiss them, which I think happens a lot these days. So
you got to be yourself. You got to be yourself, because if you get famous and you're not being yourself, you'll get this thing called imposter syndrome. And man, it's it'll make you not want to get out of bed in the mornings.
That the imposter syndrome, I don't even know if you're being yourself. I think imposter syndrome plagues all of us. I mean, everybody. I have imposter. I don't know, Struan, if you ever suffer from that, but that's a conversation for a whole nother day.
Yeah.
Struan, you ever suffer from imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I feel like there's certain points in your career where you're doing things that you just never believe you could, and there's an element of it. I met some amazing people through this thing that we do, and sometimes standing making whiskey drinks for Dr. Dre, or the day that we I don't know, certain places I've been, or you get little bits of TV or things like that here, you just have to remember that like it's all happening because you got yourself there, and you're not bluffing it. And yeah, it's a tough one, but like Gary says, like if you just kind of stay true to what you really like, you don't have to be the funniest, you don't have to be the quickest witted. You just really what people are looking for is just something genuine. So don't always try to be the quickest with a joke or the loudest in the room, because if that's not naturally what you're like, it's not that fun to be living out a completely different kind of personality. So like if you are going to try and make your way in whatever you're going to do in this industry, like there is space for every single personality.
Absolutely.
There is space for every different, like extrovert, introvert. It honestly, it doesn't matter. Like some of the most interesting people that you're going to meet are very, very shy. Don't worry about it, right? Because there's going to be a place for you in this entire, like, spirits business is literally billion-dollar industries, right? There's loads of room for all of us. So you don't have to be a rock star. But if you're a rock star, there's room for you as well, right?
I love that. I think on those words we're gonna end. Don't try to be anybody else. Just be yourself, because you can compare yourself to a lot of people. I did that for a long time. So it doesn't do you any good. Just all you can be is yourself. So on that note, we're gonna wrap up the show, which is gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Gary, always lovely. I'm glad I got to talk to you more. Struan, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. So get some sleep. I know it's later there for Struan, and he has a 7-week-old, as he said, so it's the best sleep he's going to get because he's not home. And Gary,
I've got a dinner. It's a brand ambassador life. I've got a dinner to go to. So
that's so true. You probably have a brand dinner with some people. You're going to be out for a while. So, but thanks again, guys. This was really great. And this will be online for any of you who missed any of the show or are watching. It will be online for the next 2 weeks on Facebook, and then it's on YouTube on Celebrate the Brand Ambassador forever. So thanks again, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Great chatting to you guys.
See you soon.
You too. Bye.
See you guys.
Doing this in the right way. I'm doing this the wrong way. There you go. Ending broadcast.